welcome back to Coach Ben's mini-series on the Old Testament. This is part 3 of the Big Five themes. Now I'm moving into more of a historical perspective, so that way hopefully towards the end of this video or part of the next video that we can relate back to those Big Five themes. So we're going to step away from them just temporarily or just put them on the back burner because they are important. And we're going to talk about the 700 years more than 700 years. It's thousands of years actually of persecution and exile. So we moved from temple. I put that in the last video of Solomon building a temple, very clear. It becomes a connection to exile and persecution because once we have a temple, people are going to try to take it over or destroy it to kind of show power over them. So here we go. Solomon's temple is built and then King Nebuchadnezzar attacks. So King Nebuchadnezzar is an enemy to the Jewish people with the Babylonian exiles and all this other stuff. That he comes in and attacks and almost destroys the temple. When this happens, Jewish people are in exile because there's no more promised land. They're kicked off the promised land when he takes over. It is a big, big ordeal for Jewish people. When it also happens, remember what this is? This is the Ark of the Covenant, which hosts the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments is missing. So our only manifestation put on the world for us in concrete form is now gone and never found again. The Ten Commandments. And ultimately, this is a part of scholars and peoples and Isaiah and all kinds of people start asking, well, whose fault is this? Is it the Jewish people's fault? Or is this a test? Or is it God's fault? Ultimately, there is no right or wrong answer to this, but it makes us wonder, is God punishing the Israelites, the Jewish people, for not always being loyal and not protecting the Ark of the Covenant and protecting the promised land that was given to them? Remember, we talked about that cycle of sin. So, is it the Jewish people's fault? Is God punishing them? Or is it just life? And we have to ponder that. In 516 BCE, before Christ, the temple is rebuilt. But guess what? It's almost destroyed again when the Romans come in and take over. But there is a part of it left today. It is called the Wailing Wall. This is a very, very, very spiritual and holy place for Jewish people. It is in the Jewish person's cultural religious belief that they need to make at least one pilgrimage, one visit to this wall, to this holy spot once in their lifetime. Because now that Jews live all over the world, it's not always feasible to go there all the time. But this is a very famous place where people write prayers and they roll them up and then they place them in the cracks of the walls. So this is the only thing that's left of the temple. And you can see thousands of people are going there. And for the longest time, women weren't allowed in there. And there was like conspiracies and women dressing up as men to go to the wall. Now I think there's a separate spot just for women. Still separate because we're still very patriarchal, but there is a spot for them. All right. My next slide, unfortunately, is here. So exile continues. I should have put it all on one slide, but we'll just continue. So we're going to be a 3-part series, not 4. Exile continues. And from that time to this time, Jewish people are dispersed across the land. So after the Romans came in, they lost their promised land for a long, long time. If you don't recognize this picture, it is one of the pictures from the Holocaust. It happened with World War II. And this is when Nazi Germany took over and started displacing Jewish people even off their promised land. Jews that were living in Germany and other parts of the world start to get separated, start to get oppressed, start to be killed, and put into concentration camps. The biggest concentration camp being Auschwitz. It's very scary feeling. People can go visit this memorial now so they can remember of the things that happened. People were brought to Auschwitz and other concentration camps to either work and or die, to be put to death. This is a very, very serious and personal connection for me. because my family, is Jewish, and that most of my family from my father's side, almost all of it, about 90%, were killed in the Holocaust. The only people that were survived the Holocaust was my great aunt, who was very old of age and died in the United States when I was just a little one. And then my grandmother and grandfather are refugees from the Holocaust, but they also passed away with old age. But they came in when they were very young. And my uncle, who now lives in Seattle, Washington, was a young child that has the tattoo marks on his arm for surviving the concentration camp. And he only survived because he knew how to work with his hand and make these little trinket boxes that the Nazi soldiers enjoyed and actually gave to their wives as presents. So they kept him alive to make these things for their personal life. And that actually saved his life. He was only 6 or 7, and he knew how to do this because of his father. The rest of my family was unfortunately killed and lost during this time. So it's a long time of exile. Years after the rebuilding of the temple in 615 BCE. So, but out of all this craziness and oppression of the Jewish Holocaust, we did get something out of it. We got the State of Israel. After World War II, the Allied powers got together and created a treaty and then gave the land back to Israel. They said they've been oppressed and too much has happened to them, that the land of Israel should be given back. This is the promised land, given back to the Jewish people. This is the flag. The State of Israel is born. Jews are very happy that they get their land back. However, it's not really the save all because people are living all over the world. My grandparents were living happily in Germany. So that's not Israel. They're not expected to go back to Germany, nor would they want to. So, and it's not all that great because now we get conflict. We have different religious groups that believe that this land belongs to them. And now there's this image comes from a silly song that was made that this land was promised to me. But really, who does it belong to? Jews believe it's theirs. Christians believe it's theirs because we're descendants from Abraham, just like the Jewish people. And so do Muslims believe it's theirs because they are also descendants from Abraham, that first patriarch. So it doesn't solve the problems, and we are still, in today's world, still in a state of chaos because of this. It is not a happy situation. So, despite Israelites being the first people to be mentioned in the Bible and that everyone kind of accepts that, other people say that doesn't matter because we're branched off and we're different people and we live all over the place. So, the state of Israel is still around. The Jewish people do have their promised land, but it is a time of war and chaos for this location. So, if we take a look back at the big 5 themes: covenant, promised land, temple, exile, Messiah. We look at this special relationship between God and the Israelites. We look at this promised land given just to you, even though it is today still in question and conflict. A temple is a thank you to God. Exile is the relationship at a challenge. And the Messiah is, when is that Messiah coming? Because the Jewish people said, all those people that came to help save us, all those judges, all those prophets, all those warriors, they did not lead us into the promise to eternity. They didn't lead us into this heaven-like afterlife. So when is the Messiah coming to save us forever? Is the question. Now you have the challenge of looking at the Jewish Holocaust and figuring out, how does this come into play? How do these 5 themes come into play with Jewish history? Covenant's a little challenging, but promised land, pretty clear. Temple, going to be a little more challenging. Exile's pretty clear. And Messiah, who can be Messiah-like figures for this situation? Give it a shot. Think, what can you come up with? So, when is our Messiah, militant, kingly person, coming to stay? And that's ultimately Messianic history through the Old Testament. It is the Jewish hope, number one hope of all time, is the Messiah to come. All right. No Messiah. I'm sorry. I meant to say that no Judaism equals no Jesus equals no Christianity. And the reason I'm bringing that up, it's a little side note because we're going to be moving into the New Testament up here pretty quickly with the birth of Jesus. And that we need to understand that Jesus was Jewish. So no Judaism equals no Jesus equals no Christianity, because that concept of Messiah would not have existed. Jesus is Jewish. We'll talk about that in a whole new way coming up. Oh, well, we don't need to look at this right now. All right. Thanks for listening. Talk to you another time.